The story of Lois Auta and the challenges of living with physical disabilities. So far, some states, including the Federal Capital Territory in Nigeria, committed to the process of addressing all barriers and provision of access to quality education to meet the diverse needs of all learners in the same learning environment, as reflected in the broader understanding of the United Nations Inclusive Education and Sustainable Development Goal 4. Nine years after, the prejudice against people with disabilities has continued and is now more prevalent, as all efforts to addressing the long-standing concerns of the discrimination against persons with disabilities as contained in the Nigeria's Prohibition Act of 2019 is becoming fruitless in a country of over 31 million people living with disabilities. These statistics makes Nigeria, by far, a nation with most significant highest number of such group of people in the world.
We have 5 major types of disabilities: physical disability, developmental disability, learning disability, emotional and behavioral difficulties, and sensory disabilities. Now, all of these types of disabilities have its own peculiarities. Now, for students with learning difficulty, you require specific tools to assess them, tools to also teach them properly. Disability itself is a spectrum. It's mild, moderate, and severe. So sometimes those students that are on the spectrum of severe, they are better off being taught in segregated education, which is special education schools and special education centers. But those that are having mild cases, moderate cases, they can actually be taught in mainstream schools, because that way their teachers know the concept of inclusive education. They only need to have special education teachers or learning mentors attached to them in the mainstream schools, and they're carried along with their peers.
The enormity of the need is the disabilities are in different forms. So the child may not even be on the autism spectrum, or the child may not have cerebral palsy, just different learning disabilities. They are enormous, and people, unfortunately, the awareness is very low. You know, I heard this teacher, that's the story I started with. I heard this teacher who goes to this big school saying, "Oh, that's really nice, and I think I'm interested in that because I have a child in my class that I noticed some," that was her expression, "I noticed some, and I'm not even sure how to come to her parents with this." So imagine how many teachers are in that place, noticing some small things about children in those spaces, and they have no clue how to help these children. It is heartbreaking.
Against this background, AD4 TV Radio seeks to find out the critical challenges associated with growing up as a child living with disabilities in Nigeria by discussing with the director, Cedar Seed Foundation, a non-governmental organization which advocates for inclusive sustainable development for people living with disabilities in Nigeria. The director of Cedar Seed Foundation, Lois Auta, highlighted how the challenge of living with disability nearly stood against her access to basic education.
I was affected by polio when I was 2 years old. When I grew up and found myself differently from other children, inferiority complex set in, low self-esteem set in. I never wanted to play with anybody, from my family to my compound, my church, school, everywhere I found myself. Until God used my mom and my dad to say to me, "Lois, you have to be proud of yourself. Lois, you have to believe in yourself. Lois, you have to be grateful to God for keeping you alive. Thank God you did not die in the process. You are alive. That means God has a plan for you." So they began to talk to me day by day, week by week. And before I knew it, I conquered that spirit. They encouraged me to go to school. Even when people try to discourage them, why can't you concentrate on other children? This one is a girl and she has a disability. One day she will marry and your name is off her name. Why won't you focus on other children and leave her alone? My parents say, no, among all my children, she's the most intelligent and the most brilliant one. We'll never leave her alone. We'll be with her. We'll stand with her until the day we die.
Join us as we examine issues of corruption affecting the standard of education in public schools in the Federal Capital Territory, Nigeria, at all levels of education, and the impact on the girl and boy child, people living with disabilities, women, and youth in general. Join Leaves on Worms on AD4 TV radio, where government strategies on these critical areas and their impact on the lives of residents of the territory are x-rayed. Stay tuned on our channels weekly for this revealing program, jointly produced by AD4 TV Radio and Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism and supported by MacArthur Foundation.
Outer, who now works with people living with disabilities in the Federal Capital Territory, said her access to basic education was further confronted by pay gap challenge and the societal belief against education of the girl child.
Most times, parents of children with disabilities cannot afford the fees. So whenever they take their children for school enrollment, they are rejected. Either the school say we don't have the facilities, or they give the parents school fees beyond their expectation, so they won't be able to go further with the conversation. The systems, the structures are not inclusive. One of them is budgeting. Federal Ministry of Education do not have plans for children with disabilities, especially the younger ones, the younger generation. I mean, those at the basic learning environment, primary school to be precise. Children at that level of age suffer discrimination a lot. Is it distance? Is it facilities? Is it language barrier? Because some of these children at the grassroots, they only understand their own language. So taking them to school to learn will become a challenge.
She identified this as a major challenge still affecting girl child education and a major hindrance to the education of the female children living with disabilities in the Federal Capital Territory and the country as a whole.
Because some of these children at the grassroots, they only understand their own language. So taking them to school to learn will become a challenge. Because disability affected them, so their parents concentrated on getting them on their feet first before enrolling them to school, just like what happened to me.
She said discrimination and limited access to basic social services that also includes education facilities are major hindrances to access to basic education of children of school age living with disabilities in the FCT.
Discrimination is one of the biggest challenge in the lives of children with disabilities. Oh, we cannot enroll you due to your type of disability. We don't have what it takes to cater for you. We don't have the enabling environment so you could learn in a very conducive classrooms. So classrooms are not accessible. There is no ramp at the entry point. The assembly halls are inaccessible to them. The exams hall are inaccessible to them. The toilets are inaccessible because some of the toilets have slimmer doors. They cannot accommodate those in wheelchairs. Those on crutches, the same thing. What they see is staircase instead of a ramp.
A visit to the disabled school FCT Abuja for the handicapped in Kuje Belt in 1999 revealed that the school is going through difficult times as its students are still grappling with dehumanizing conditions. Our investigation showed that the dormitories, especially that of male students, have no beds. A teacher who requested not to be named said some of the students sleep in unacceptable conditions, with some sleeping on bad mattresses. He also told us that feeding has remained a bad major problem. This was further confirmed by disreputable state of the dormitory.
This is Abuja School for the Deaf. The means of communication is sign language. Anytime from 7, you cannot sign in darkness. Nobody will see it.
Okay.
If you are privileged to have enough solar energy for them to see the night as if they're in the day, is a good one. So majorly we are challenged with that. The one given to us are not solar. You understand, panel, but battery. Some of the battery are very expensive, and if they break down, we really need to source for replacements. Now, another one is the mattress. You know, you will deal with special children. I don't call them less privileged. If you call them less privileged, I'll be angry with you. They are special children. Yes. And when you are handling special children, it's not all of them that we cope immediately, especially when you first. So most of those mattresses that government supplied, some of them are messed up. And we want them to use it for 1 or 2 years and replace it. Replacement at times might not come as at time. So it's a challenge.
The Federal Capital Territory Administration, in its 2021 and 2022 budget appropriation for the 3 physically challenged schools under the supervision of the FCT administration, allocated the sum of 45 million naira to be expended on the school. The document made available by the Universal Basic Education Commission, as shown in its receipt for the disbursement of funds to support special education across the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, revealed that the sum of 36,727,000 naira 914 was last allocated to the 3 special schools in the FCT. The receipt graph also revealed that the special schools have not received any attention from the federal government between 2019 till date. Further speaking to these challenges, Alta identified major risk factors, which includes avoidable hardship of traveling long distances to special schools and the pain of confining children living with disabilities into segregation in deplorable school conditions. She identified this reason as well as others as key factors responsible for the over 200,000 out-of-school children living with disabilities in the FCT.
The systems, the structures are not inclusive. One of them is budgeting. Federal Ministry of Education do not have plans for children with disabilities, especially the younger ones, the younger generation. I mean, those at the basic learning environment. primary school, to be precise.
Ku kasance tare da mu yayin da muke tattaunawa kan yadda matsalolin cin hanci da rashawa ya dabaibaye ingancin ilimi a makarantun gwamnati da ke birnin tarayya Abuja da ma Najeriya a matakan ilimi daban-daban, tasirin ilimin ga 'ya'ya mata da maza da ma masu bukata ta musamman, mata da matasa ma ba a bar su a baya ba. Kasance da kafar AD4 TV Radio don ilmantuwa kan manufofin gwamnati, tsare-tsare da ma yadda matakan aiwatar da su ke tasiri ko akasin haka. Yin tankaɗe da riraya na daga cikin abubuwan da muke baiwa muhimmanci. Ku tabbatar kun kasance da tashar mu ta AD4 TV Radio a kowane mako don sauraron wannan shiri. Bisa ɗaukar nauyin AD4 TV Radio da cibiyar Wole Soyinka da ke tallafawa binciken injin da tallafawar gidauniyar Makata.
Children at that level of age suffer discrimination a lot. Is it distance? Is it facilities? Is it language barrier? Because some of these children at the grassroots, they only understand their own language. So taking them to school to learn will become a challenge because disability affected them, so their parents concentrated on getting them on their feet first before enrolling them to school, just like what happened to me.
Going through the university was not easy. Right now, I think I'm a postgraduate person. I have my master's in education, administration, and planning. But while going through the school, it was not easy. Because you see a lot of schools, they tell you, no, we can't accommodate you. We don't have the facilities and all the rest of them. Even up to today, a lot of our people are still facing those challenges of exclusion. No, we cannot take you, and so on and so forth. And so growing up in the university was not easy. You need to turn the light in the night. You need to read. Sometimes you're looking for somebody to record for you. You can't see. Sometimes you're looking for somebody to help you, assist you in one thing or the other. You cannot see. And so it is by the grace of God that we have overcome some of these challenges.
To Mrs. Sauta, adoption of inclusive education in the Federal Capital Territory may be far from reality, as the FCT administration still struggles to maintain the special schools for these children living with disabilities.
And that's where the issue of disability inclusive budgeting comes in. We will keep talking about that until it is inserted in the budget line from the federal government budget. We want to see it in that document come to the state level and to the local government level, including FCT. So FCT should start by leading the example, showing the way to other states that yes, this is the way to go. this is how we do it in the FCT. We always reserve a budget line for inclusive education in the FCT.
While the FCT has developed policy framework on inclusive education, out-identified zero attempt at the implementation, she emphasized that policy frameworks and genuine partnership with major stakeholders were necessary to serve as implementation guide on statutory planning and budgeting to successfully achieve inclusive education in the Federal Capital Territory.
Ask questions. We need to engage parents of children with disabilities. We need to engage Jonapid. We need to engage organizations of persons with disabilities whenever we are establishing a school. The curriculum has to state that, yes, you must enroll a child with disability, whether you have the facilities or not. Once a child with disability comes to enroll, don't ever reject. Rather, provide the facility.
As of 2022, March 2022, there's been about 377 million naira that is laying dormant in accessing these funds. The reason is because, of course, we know the Nigerian factor is there, accessing these funds. And again, in getting these funds, schools have to pass through particular formalities and documentations to get these funds. And some schools can actually fulfill these documentations, but in order to also access it, they have to provide counterpart funds in getting these funds. That's getting or accessing the special education funds. And that's where the issue is. Again, like I mentioned, the Nigerian factor is there. The government has been able to provide these special education funds for schools, for unity schools, that's government schools, to be able to use it and provide special education services for their students that will require it. But before that fund gets into the government schools, there's always the funnel in which some officials siphon these funds. The inability to access these funds means that students that require additional needs can't get it. So let's say, for example, a student with physical disability, that student is wheelchair bound. Now, with that fund, they can actually provide ramps into their schools. But inability to access these funds means that that student, by the time he or she gets into their school, they will have to drop their wheelchair by the door and crawl into the class. Ramps cannot be built into the schools. Specialized trainings cannot be provided for the teachers to also be able to provide accommodation. Accommodation is when you provide adjustments to the instructions that you're providing to your students. Now, teachers are not fully equipped to do that. Now, these funds are meant to provide trainings for these schools, make the school inclusive. So that's the aspect of physical disability. It also means that the IEP process of identifying the condition, evaluating and drawing up an IEP down to transitioning from one level of school to another cannot be fully fulfilled because the fund is not there to do it. Now, because again it is not there, teachers now are neglecting this aspect, and that means that students cannot actually fulfill or reach their full potential because these funds will have done a lot for them academically, socially, and also emotionally.
The Chief Executive Officer of the CEDA organization further speaks to the awareness on issues of inclusive education in the FCT among policymakers, professionals, parents, and other stakeholders.
We need to collaborate with organizations of persons with disabilities. Let us know how UBEC needs to start working on ensuring that everyone is carried along, especially children with disabilities. So we need to create more sensitive programs, activities, and projects in that direction. We need to start working with media organizations like yours, radio programs, TV programs, newspaper reviews. We should mention UBEC We should mention inclusive education. We should mention children with disabilities.
Need specialized units in UBEC. Now, these specialized units need to be able to track, evaluate, and monitor how special education is being provided in schools. That way, the class is supportive, it provides an inclusive classroom. Their peers are also learning about disabilities. It's also teaching them about real-world diversity, because in the real world, you meet quite a lot of learning diverse needs, learning styles. So by having an inclusive classroom where everyone is there, irrespective of your academic functioning, irrespective of your strengths, your weaknesses, you're being taught alongside everyone. So their learning and the bias of disability is also being removed, and it's better off for everybody.
Consequently, as the inability of the Federal Capital Territory to put its special schools in good shape has continued, the lower-level institutional and human capacity among relevant education agencies of government in the FCT have also further complicated the challenges confronted by children living with disabilities in the FCT.